Welcome to the third edition of the Fantasy Draft Weekly Rundown. I just wanted to start by saying what a great experience it was this weekend at the Clayton Kershaw experience and just how awesome the whole trip was. I think all the winners had an absolute great time. It was all expenses paid, and I cannot wait for the next experience. Joining me as always is co-host and NFL Ironman London Fletcher. London, what'd you think of week number two?
Ricky, hold on 1 second, man. You can't talk about your Clayton Kershaw experience and not share with people how you asked Clayton Kershaw about if he looks at the splits. And Kershaw was like,
All
huh?
right, a little bit of a story time. Yeah, I did have a few minutes with Clayton Kershaw, and while everyone was kind of starstruck, I wanted to get as many questions in as I could. I asked him if he studied the lefty righty splits, and he kind of gave me a look like, what? But he did say that he studies the guys that are going to be in the lineup. He looks at, regardless of lefty or righty, he looks at their tendencies. So at least there was that. And he went down kind of who he thought on the Pirates was going to be in the lineup, and then he threw a pretty good game the next day. So his studies looked and worked pretty good.
Okay, he just calls it something different. That's
Yeah,
all.
yeah,
All right,
basically. I mean,
all right, cool.
and really, he doesn't have to look at the splits. He's a lefty, so what does he need to know how these guys do against righties? When I think about it, but it was worth a shot. Anyways, we are now going into week number three, and I guess I should ask you, London, what did you make of week number two?
A lot of surprises. It's early in the season, week to week. You just don't know what team is going to show up. You think about, last week the St. Louis Rams beat the Seattle Seahawks. Then this past weekend, they go to Washington. Everybody thinks they're going to win that game, and they lose to Washington. Same thing with Miami. They beat the Skins the first game, lose to Jacksonville the second game. So just right now, everybody's still trying to figure it out. Each week, week by week, you just never know what you're going to get.
Yeah, and I think fantasy owners are trying to figure it out too. And we're starting to get a better idea with every week. Usually, I recommend not to use the stats fully till week number four when we have a real sample size. But statistics are starting to pile up, and we're starting to get a feel for how teams run the ball. How the receivers are gonna get the touches divided, how good these defenses are. What did you learn in week number two? What surprised you, and what did you learn about those?
One thing surprised me is I started Tennessee Titans defense against the Cleveland Browns. I'm looking at, all right, Johnny Manziel starting. He didn't look good at all the first game that he played against the Jets. This is a surefire pick for me. And Johnny goes out and throws 2 touchdown passes to big play. Travis Benjamin was outstanding, and so that was one thing that surprised me. And then you look at the Philadelphia Eagles offense. They're at home against the Cowboys. And just 7 yards rushing. That offense is in total disarray right now. So those are two things that really surprised me.
Yeah, and maybe the surprise of the weekend is Johnny Manziel throws a long touchdown and does not showboat like we thought he was. Maybe that was the biggest upset. All right, since we've gone over week number two, let's get immediately into week number three since there is a full slate of football yet again this weekend. Let's start with the picks. As always, let's start with the quarterbacks. And I'm going to go with Cam Newton. This New Orleans team just is in disarray. Drew Brees has issues with his shoulder now. We're looking at a team with Carson Palmer dropped 307 yards and 3 TDs in week one. Jameis Winston last week, similar skill set to Cam Newton, though I think Cam, we can all say, is more polished despite the lack of weapons. He went 207 and a touchdown and scored a rushing touchdown. I think that's about what you can expect from Cam. He's not priced like a top quarterback, so I think in cash games he makes a lot of sense. He's going to give you those rushing yards, and that creates a nice floor. Who do you like at quarterback?
I'm gonna go Captain Obvious. I like Tom Brady. Just for when you think about what he did against Buffalo, throwing for nearly 500 yards and 3 TDs against Buffalo's defense. That will, when everything's all said and done, they will be one of the better defenses in the league. Nobody can stop Gronkowski right now. Brady's playing with that chip on his shoulder. And then as a sleeper, and man, I hesitate to say this, but I'm gonna go with Brandon Wheaton. As a sleeper for the Dallas Cowboys. Jerry Jones he got on radio and said how Whedon was the best pure passer he's seen in a long time. Now, part of that is, I'm sure, is Jerry Jones being Jerry Jones, being a salesman. But I'm gonna say look at Whedon as a possible sleeper against the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons pass defense that's not that great.
There you go. You need a contrarian option. I'm sure most of the world will not be on Brandon Whedon this week. So there you go. There's where you go to get your edge. Go. Let's go to the running back position because I've been waiting to click this guy's name into my lineup all year. Le'Veon Bell, simply who I think is the best back in the NFL. At least he's in the best situation. I think we can agree on that. Looking at D'Angelo Williams, who thought he was going to be the top fantasy running back after 2 weeks. Maybe it's a system thing. Maybe it's not the back. But if I had to choose between the two backs, it's Le'Veon Bell, and it's not close. This guy catches passes. He's playing a team. We all saw Matt Jones break out in a big way last week, and Le'Veon Bell plays against the same team. Even if St. Louis proves to be stout against the run game, this is a guy who gets targeted, 8, 10 times a game out of the backfield. So there's just so much upside and so much of a safe floor here that I just think you go Le'Veon Bell and sleep like a baby at night. What do you think?
Le'Veon, the only thing I would caution against as far as playing Le'Veon, because this would be his first game back, from a conditioning standpoint, how many carries will they give him? How many touches will he get? He hasn't played in 2 weeks, so that's going to be a factor. And then you think about it, D'Angelo Williams has been the top fantasy back so far, so they're not going to all of a sudden no longer give him any carries. He's earned the right to get some touches, so that may be a situation. I don't know if it'll be a 50-50 split, but D'Angelo Williams will still be in the mix from that standpoint with the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. Guy that I like is C.J. Anderson. For the Broncos, and I know the Broncos haven't been able to run the ball thus far in this this part of the season, but going against the Detroit Lions defense that has just not been able to stop the run, this far at this point in the season, I've done a study on them. They're definitely missing Sue and Fairley. So C.J. Anderson is a good play, and then also Jonathan Stewart. He's also a good play facing the New Orleans Saints defense.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I'm a little opposite on C.J. Anderson. I'm worried about him. I think Hillman may prove to be the extra back or the better back, excuse me. But we'll see this week. This is a make or break week for C.J. Anderson. Let's move on to the wide receivers, and this one is a little dependent on whether or not Eric Decker plays. But I love Brandon Marshall, who looks like a true wide receiver one with the New York Jets. I mean, this week you can't really blame him. He was shadowed by Vontae Davis, so the fact that Decker blew up and he didn't was kind of expected. But now you put him against an Eagles team that has struggled, to hold on to keep the wide receiver ones down. We saw, week number one against Julio Jones, just how dominant he was. And I'm not saying Marshall's the same exact player, but I do think they're going to scheme him to get the ball, especially if Decker's not in the game. He is a true, big wide receiver who's got the touchdown upside. Plus, he should get plenty of catches. So he's just a dream for PPR formats like we have. And another guy who I, again, just can't wait to get in my lineup after watching him again last week is Dante Moncrief, who I think may prove to be the Colts' most effective wide receiver in our fantasy format just because T.Y. Hilton's kind of a little guy and it's difficult for him to find the end zone, whereas Moncrief is 6'2", 220. And while Hilton may get, the catches, I think Moncrief overall is going to get the most production when you factor in those touchdowns. And Andre Johnson to me looks slow and I don't want to say done, but approaching being done. I think the Texans would have kept him if they felt that he could still play. So I think Moncrief is the play for the wide receivers. I think Andrew Luck has a lot to prove this week after 2 poor weeks, and I think he's going to take it out on the Titans defense. What do you make of the wide receiver position?
I like Travis Benjamin for Cleveland. You look at what he did against Tennessee. He had the 2 touchdown catches, but he also had a punt return for a TD. So you talk about TDs being important. This guy gave you 3 touchdowns. A week ago. He was a favorite target of Manziel, and even though McCown is starting, the Browns offense, I'm sure they'll look to get him, some deep shots. Utilize his speed against Oakland's offense. Steve Smith Sr. He torched him a week ago, so he's one guy that I like. Terrence Williams against Dallas. I mentioned Brandon Wheaton being a sleeper for me. So who's he going to get the ball to? Terrence Williams. No Dez Bryant. Jason Witten, it's iffy whether he's going to play. If he does, he's not 110% or 100% rather. So he definitely will be a guy. And then AJ Green against Baltimore. Oakland had two wide receivers go for over 100 yards against Baltimore a week ago. So AJ Green will be a big play for me as well.
So there it is, London all in on this Cowboy passing game. I guess if you're taking the shot, you might as well go all in. So on to the tight end position, and I think that this one is going to be less popular this week, and I kind of like it that way. Is that people are starting to get weary of the Jimmy Graham situation because he hasn't been nearly as involved as we want and nearly as involved as he wants. I actually want to read his comments exactly. Uh, basically, the team's a mess, and Jimmy Graham says he's pissed off and, quote, hates his new role with the team heading into this week. Yeah, I definitely, definitely. And heading into this week, they have the second highest implied total according to Vegas with 29.3 points. I think they got to make this guy happy. They signed him. The Bears defense allowed the most fantasy points to tight ends last year, so this just makes too much sense in the world. I think Jimmy Graham has his first real monster game of 2015 this year.
You know, uh, Jimmy Graham. I'm still not sure the Seattle Seahawks know how to utilize him. I think two better plays at tight end would be Crockett Gilmore, for the Baltimore Ravens going against the Cincinnati Bengals, and then I like Tyler Eifert, who will be on the other side of the ball. He's going against the Baltimore Ravens, so those are two tight ends I love in this game, this matchup. I think those are probably better choices for me at the tight end position.
Yeah, it's not often you get to roster a guy with the first name Crockett.
I know, I love it. I couldn't wait to mention Crockett Gilmore. He's coming off two touchdown game against Oakland a week ago.
Let's move on to defense because I know that's your specialty. I'd actually left it off the initial sheet for today's show, and I was yelled at because we need you talking about defense. What
Well, not only that, defense is important in fantasy football, man. It's a position, so it's basically a position play on our lineup. So defense, how could you forget that? You mentioned every other position, but defense. Come on, Ricky, let's get with this.
Well, usually when I fill in my lineup, they're the last to come, so I kind of overlooked it. But let's give you some defenses that shouldn't be overlooked and maybe can make a difference this week. I'm going with the Arizona Cardinals against the San Francisco team. I've never been a giant fan of Colin Kaepernick. You look at his splits; he throws to the right side of the field and he completes passes at about 60%, whereas the left side he's more around 45 or 50%. And I think he's an easy quarterback to scheme for. Uh, they're at home. San Francisco's projected at only 18 and a half points, and they're a 6.5 point favorite. So there's a lot to like about this Arizona defense, which has been pretty stout against the run. So Carlos Hyde will have a tough time, and if so, they're going to have a hard time beating Arizona. Who do you like at defense?
I like Seattle. I like Seattle going against Chicago. Two reasons. Jimmy Clausen starting Chicago. They're struggling, trying to figure it out. Actually, three reasons. This would be Seattle's home opener. They're off to an 0-2 start, and that defense is not didn't play well against Green Bay or St. Louis. And then they get Cam Chancellor back, the tone setter for that defense. So you add all those three things together, and this has the makings of a big day for the Seattle Seahawks defense. And then the New York Jets, the New York Football Jets against the Philadelphia Eagles. This is a bad matchup for a struggling Philadelphia Eagles team. They're still trying to figure things out. You're going on the road to face the Jets, who are coming on. That defense is outstanding right now. So those are two defenses that will be big plays this weekend.
There you go, London Fletcher on defense. That's what you guys all came for. Let's get to this week's questions. There were yet again some good ones this week, and let's stay on the topic of defense, but let's go specifically to players. This one comes from at 2QBFFB Sal Salvatore, one of our friends in the industry. He asks, which young and upcoming linebacker do you see becoming one of the game's best in the next year or so?
Young and upcoming. Obviously, you know, Kuechly. He's a fourth year linebacker. Love Luke Kuechly for the Carolina Panthers. You know, as I think of DeAndre Levy, he's not really a young guy. He's a guy that's definitely overlooked. What other young guys? You know, I like Keenan Robinson for the Washington Redskins. A guy who extremely athletic, rangy, about 6'3", can run. I think this defense is really suited for him. So I like Keenan Robinson as a guy who, as he gets more experience, he'll be one of the better upper echelon inside linebackers.
There you go. Question number 2. If you were a pro wrestler for WWE, so if Vince McMahon signed your contract tomorrow, what would your ring name be? And that comes from at Josh3302.
You know, see, I've had a lot of nicknames growing up. Some I can share, some I can't. For reasons that I won't share. Yeah, wrestling, man. If I was a wrestler,
The Flying Fletcher.
no. Let's maybe something possibly. I don't know, Black Stallion. You know, or the Tasmanian Devil. They used to call me that on the football field. My nickname is Bam, so can't go Bam Bam Bigelow. Maybe Bam, something like that. Something with the Bam in it. I don't know.
There you go. The Black Stallion.
The Black Stallion. Or Night Train. Night Train. Night Train.
Start getting those spandex shorts made, Vince McMahon. Here he comes. All right, let's go to the last one. This one comes from Facebook. It is what relatively unknown player similar to Matt Jones will burst onto the scene this week from Mark Paquette.
I like David Johnson, the rookie running back for the Arizona Cardinals. Each week he's had a touchdown. First week he had a receiving touchdown against the New Orleans Saints. That was actually ended up being the game winner, and then he had a kickoff return for a touchdown. Last weekend. So, and Bruce Arians has talked about getting him more involved in the offense. So, you have an explosive player like that. I mean, the kid can absolutely fly. So, Bruce Arians is a very creative offensive mind. So he'll figure out a way to get him the ball, whether it's running it out of the backfield, catching passes some way. Just look for his role to continue to evolve in the Arizona Cardinals offense.
Yeah, he kind of reminds me of Antone Smith from last year, who was just a king of the big plays, except for the fact that he has a pedigree and we expected him to have a role. Whereas Smith kind of came out of nowhere. So it could just be one of those seasons where this kid's scoring, 50, 40-yard touchdown just about every week. So I like that. This has been the third edition, for the third week of football of the Fantasy Draft podcast. I'm Ricky Sanders with London Fletcher.
And you know what, Ricky? This has been the best one.
Every week.
We're getting better, man.
Every
week. Every week.
Until next time, we are out of here.